Hi, everybody. Leigh here from my very lonely, empty treatment room. Figured we had to do something else with it. So I'm live here for a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes here on Wednesdays at lunchtime to share with you a little something else about the body. So as I posted this morning, I'm just going to do a few minute talk about the intestines. So I'm going to grab a book here and I'm going to hold it up in front of the camera, get nice, whoops, I have to do this, get nice and close. Whoops, I can't figure this out. So nope, this hand. So on this, it reverses everything in this live broadcasty thing. So this, whoops, I gotta go all the way across. This is the small intestines, okay? So these are the small intestines, and in front of the small intestines is a curtain of fat called omentum. Here in this picture, it's lifted up. The curtain is lifted up. The omentum is a kind of an amazing thing. Is the omentum is like protection and keeps it warm, but also what the omentum will do is if you have an infection somewhere, it will migrate to try to make it, encompass the area that has the infection in order to try to keep it warmer, keep the infection part warmer and contained. So anyway, so we're going to talk about the small intestine because I think it's like friggin' amazing. So first of all, the small intestine is in the circle around your belly button. I think I have to back up for you to be able to see me. Circle around the belly button, and it's framed by the large intestine coming up, across, down, and sort of across. So your small intestines are right in the middle. The interesting thing about your small intestines is that 80% of absorption of your nutrients is happening there. Like, how important is that? 80% of your nutrients is absorption is happening in your small intestine. And I know I've posted about this and you guys have probably read this, but it never hurts to hear things a few times. So think about this, because what I've been noticing is on my crazy little walks around and everything like that is that, seeing my neighbors and stuff, is lots of people look like they're kind of getting a little bloated there. And so one of the first places that kind of bloats when you're eating foods that don't work for you, of course, is your stomach, and then can go into the small intestine, can be part of the small intestine. So that small intestine it can get bigger and bloat out, or it can actually get slack. It just depends on what your reaction is to it and the inflammation that's going on. But in this few minutes, what I wanted to do is to talk about the implications of what happens when the small intestines get bloated or there's something going on with it. And I have to say, it's incredibly common for people to have food reactions and not to realize they're having food reactions. Because with small intestine food reactions, what you can feel is either, of course, you feel bloated. But another one is that you can actually feel like food won't go down, right? Food won't go down, so that's also an issue in the beginning part of the small intestine. It's called the duodenum. The small intestine has 3 parts to it, and the first part is the duodenum, that's just out of the stomach. And a lot of times what can happen is these inflammatory overeating of fats and sugars and carbs and things like that really create this inflammatory reaction. So that happens a lot. Let me pull my board closer, okay? Let me pull my board closer so that then when I'm writing on it, you can see. So the small intestines, as I said, are sort of in the middle of the abdomen. But one of the things that you don't know is that, I've said this a million times on Facebook, is that there is fascia that surrounds everything in the body. So everything except for a few nerve tracts have fascia around them. It's just named something different in all the places. So your small intestines are also in I always say it this way, a fascial bag. So they are in a fascial bag. And that fascial bag is called mesentery. That fascial bag is called mesentery. And so the mesentery, interestingly enough, is actually attached into your back. I'm going to turn the page and I'm going to show you what it looks like here. Whoops, I got to do this again. That is your colon lifted up. See the hand at the top? And all that stuff that looks like kind of like whatever you want to say about, whoops, let me get there. All of this that is your mesentery, which is the bag that holds your small intestine, is attached to the inside of the back wall of your body. So you have this mesenteric attachment to your back wall. So you have this whole bag, and then it's attached inside your back. So you know where I'm going. I probably don't even have to tell you more. You just know where I'm going. So one of the things what's in my back? Here I have lumbar vertebrae, okay? The last 5 vertebrae, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertebrae, okay? There's 5 lumbars. These are my low back vertebrae. And what happens is that, and here is my sacrum that comes on the bottom here. Here's my sacrum. So where is that picture that I just showed you, the attachment of that? So the inside front, the front side of my sacrum on the right, it then goes up and attaches on the body of my vertebrae, my number 4 lumbar. It attaches on the lumbar vertebrae of my 3rd, so it attaches here on my sacrum. L4, L3, and then these are those are like the wings of the vertebrae, the transverse processes. It attaches on L2, okay? So you have this mesentery that does this, which is the picture I just showed you. So you have that, this mesentery that's attached to my lumbar spine. What do you think will happen when I'm bloated? Huh? What do you think is going to happen when my intestines, my small intestines, get bloated or have some sensitivity or there's something like that and it's attached in on my lumbar vertebrae? What do you think is going to happen? These guys are going to get pulled or have tension on them, pulling towards the inside of your body, right? It's going to pull towards the inside of your body. So anybody that's walking around looking like they're sticking out more here and rounded in, looking like they're curved more in, you definitely know. Or you can only have one of the vertebrae do that. You don't have to have the whole set do it. But what you do know is that there's tension in here, on here, when my small intestines have something cooking in them, okay? When something's going on in my small intestine, it is definitely happening here, okay? So I'm going to erase this. Give me a second here. Okay. All right. So this mesentery, which we're going to draw loosely like a big bag, okay? So the mesentery looks like a big bag here, okay? But the interesting thing, at least to me, the interesting thing to me about the mesentery as well is not only is it attached to my back and therefore it can give me low back pain, right? It's very common. But interestingly enough, you know, I talk about fascia a lot because I have come to, in all the years that I'm working, I have come to honor fascia in a way that I never understood. And I think it's because I started from a muscle background back in the 80s. That was the first thing I learned about was muscles. So my mind was caught really for a long time about how muscles are the ones that are doing everything and giving you pain, and they're so important. But in reality, it's not so much the muscle, because as I said a couple of times ago, or whenever I said it, is that muscles actually are dumb, you know, or simple. let's not say dumb, let's say simple, because a muscle only knows on and off. That's all. It knows how to turn on and contract, and then it knows how to let go and be in neutral. So it's the fascia that is surrounding it, because fascia is everywhere. So it's surrounding it that makes it so much more. The fascia is like communicating to itself, it's everywhere, and it's interconnected. Fascia is so interconnected, it's not even funny. So this fascia, the mesentery, for the new people that have joined us, the mesentery, which is around your small intestine. So my small intestine is inside here, okay? And this is my mesentery. And for the new people that just joined, let me just say that this mesentery is attached to the back wall of your abdomen. It's attaching to some of your lumbar, low back vertebrae. But I also want to show you this, is that fascia, like I say, is everywhere, but this is so interesting to me, is that the fascia, the mesentery, is connecting into the fascias. Ugh, I'm not going to do this really well. I have to erase this in order to do this. Okay, so let me show you how this kind of goes, as if this was I'm going to draw a terrible looking person here because I suck at this. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, there's that. Here they are. Here's their body. And here's their mesentery. Okay, here's the mesentery with all the small intestine in it. Well, one of the interesting things is that the fascia from the pelvic, from inside the pelvic bowl, okay, actually goes down the inner leg. It goes down the inner leg. You guys, I know you know where I'm going. I know you do. Is that, of course, the mesenteric fascia has, it isn't that the mesentery is exactly connected, but there's so much fascia, there's so many layers of it, that it also is going down the inner leg. I'll tell you a story that happened, oh my God, a bazillion years ago, before I really understood, before I actually understood. I had a young man, and obviously who will remain nameless. I had a young man who could not put his legs together because his testicles were in so much pain. He was in so much pain, and it had been going on for a year, okay? And I was no bright scholar of the body as much then. I mean, I was me, but I didn't have my osteopathic training yet either. And they came in, and you know, I did adductor work, I did, you know, low back work, I did these things and did all the muscles and did everything, and still he was still in that much pain. And one day I decided, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna, you know, I'd had some visceral work before I even went to osteopathic school, and I went in, and for some reason what I did was put my hand on his small intestine, and I slowly started lifting it away, and it released what was happening for him around his testicles. So that experience of me like saying, all right, let me try this, taught me a myriad of things. So I realize, and one of the other things is that can really happen is that this was also what made me understand this process of the fascia around the small intestine actually going down the inner leg. It goes all the way down to the foot and the arch. Was also that I learned that when you have leaky gut, which God, the estimates of how many people in our culture actually have leaky gut is just ginormous, okay? And one of the things that can happen from leaky gut, which happens here in the small intestine, is that the fluid, some of the fluid can actually track down and track into the inner leg, and that's where you'll see people sort of have pouchiness here, soft pouchiness in the inner thigh here. So the fascias, the mesentery itself is not directly connected, but it's connecting to enough of the fascia that's actually going down the inner leg. So that's another thing that's going on there, you know, that is creating, you know, issues. So let's go and let's talk about another thing around the small intestines and the small intestines. So one of the things that where your small intestines are, as I said earlier, is in the center of your body, right? In the center of your abdomen, okay? And one of the things, we'll do a side view of a woman. Here's her nose. This is the woman's nose right here, so you know that that's that side. And here is her bladder. Here's the woman's uterus, right? Here's her bowel. But what I want to tell you about this guy, and then of course here's the sacrum behind it, is that right above here is my small intestine. Pretty close to my nose. I'm just kidding. So the small intestine is above the uterus and the pelvis. I mean, it's above all of this. So you can have a woman, okay, so I'm going to have to do a little erasing and stuff like this as I do this. So you can have, this is the bowel. Don't forget, this is the bowel. This is the bladder, okay? And here's our uterus. So you can have a woman, and this usually happens either if somebody falls or if they have a baby, some other kind of injury or jarring accident can change the position of the uterus. So what you can have is, we're going to take the top of the uterus off, which is called the fundus. You can have the uterus fall forward like this, called anteversion, and what happens is the intestines fall behind it. Isn't that kind of interesting? And so what of course always happens is adhesions. They get stuck together. And when you have adhesions, what ends up happening is that you get less function. When you get adhesions, you get less function. So, so anyway, the other thing you can have, the other thing that's really common here is if a woman, and you probably know where I'm going, I'm taking the uterus out. So the woman has a hysterectomy, this definitely falls. I have to tell you that the small intestine goes into, there's a name for it, it's called ptosis, and the ptosis happens and the small intestine drops. So of course, with the drop in the small intestine, there's always drop in function when you're looking at that. But the interesting thing about organs, and then I'll sort of wrap up here because I could talk forever, is that the interesting thing about organs is that we are designed not to have a direct connection between our organs and our nervous system, our central nervous system. Because if that was true and you felt everything that was going on in your organs, you'd be like all day long, you like couldn't even function because you'd be feeling stuff all the time. So the problem, I mean, that's the great part, but the hard part is, or the problematic part is that you have something going on long time before you feel it. But the other thing I'm going to say about organs that are so interesting is, and I've talked about this before everywhere, is the fact that organs have pain patterns somewhere else long before you feel it in the organ. Long, long, long before you feel it there. So like I said, I started this off and saying you're going to feel issues in your small intestine, in your low back, or down and in your knees, right? So it's going to track down that picture that I had. It's going to track down the insides of the legs to the knees. So if somebody has low back pain, I'm always going to be checking what's going on, two organs, or one set and another organ. If somebody has something going on in their low back, they have low back pain, I am always checking as well. Well, what's happening in the structure and all that, but what's happening in the small intestine? Is that okay? And then the other thing is, and you know what, and maybe next Wednesday I'll talk about the kidneys, because woof, kidneys are awesome, like in terms of its patterns and stuff like that. So somebody asked me, can inflammation in the colon from IBS put pressure on the bladder? And you're asking on the urinary bladder. What I wouldn't say is that it puts pressure per se directly. Obviously, this is a question off of the small intestine and onto the large. But what it does do is create adherences. Let me show you. So there's two places. Oh, we're off on a tangent here. What time is it? 12:20. Okay, I hope you guys are okay. So we have the large intestine, kind of looks like this and swags and then comes down. and goes out the bowel, kind of swaggy like this. This is your ascending colon that starts in your right hip, and this part, your sigmoid here, your sigmoid is in your left hip. And these are the two places that tend to have the most IBS, right hip and left hip. It can be somewhere else, I'm not saying that, but I am saying that these are the common places because this is where things slow down and get sluggish and stuff. But what ends up happening here is that I talked about this in one of the, and I'm sure we filmed it and put it on. I talked about adhesions versus scar tissue in one of my Wednesday nights. Second Wednesday of the month, I do an hour-long talk at my school, but now it's obviously coming from here, but at the school. And I did one on adhesions and scars, and so that is what's going on probably with your bladder, is that the bladder centralized, here's your bowel, it goes bladder, uterus, and then bowel right here. This is the bowel. But also what's happening is that the adhesions start to adhere everything together. And that's fascia, guys. That's when something goes into dysfunction. I hope I still got you. When something goes into dysfunction, the fascia around it will change. And the fascia will adhere to its neighbor, which then starts to create dysfunction there. And that fascia will adhere to its neighbor. Remember that crazy old commercial that she tells two friends and they tell two friends and they tell two friends? Well, let me tell you, that's what ends up happening, is that if you have IBS here, it's going to lock up to the fascia here of the pelvic floor, and the fascia goes like this in the pelvic floor. It's going to lock up, and it's going to end up, what it's going to end up doing is creating adhesions around the bladder as well. And when your bladder fills and tries to expand, it can't, so you're feeling pressure. So what you got to do is just get somebody to come in, and if you have IBS, I'm sure you're working on getting your IBS better, but what you want somebody to do is come in and work the adhesions between everything. Well, that was my little 10-minute lunchtime thing that's now a lot longer, but I'm sorry, I love teaching and I was having so much fun. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at noon for, all right, I'll do kidneys next Wednesday.